Thank you so much, Bill. Incredibly kind introduction. Thank you. So imagine a world where every single person, every day who gets up in the morning, when they get up in the morning, the first thing they start to think about, instead of, what am I going to have for breakfast? What coffee should I have this morning? They start asking themselves questions about what good they can do in the world today. What if everyone woke up every day just on fire to figure out how they can do more good? Well, that's the purpose of what we created in Lincoln, Nebraska back in May when we created the Do More Good conference for business. We're focused on how to take individuals like Jimmy Carter here, who just a few months ago, he broke a hip in the month of May. And then on Sunday, some of you probably read this, he fell, got 19 stitches. So on Monday morning, he shows up to work at Habitat for Humanity, where he had made a commitment. That's the kind of world where individuals, where nonprofit organizations like Out Center, Southwest Michigan, are working to raise the voices of the marginalized in remote areas of Michigan, and where companies like Ford and many, many others are changing the tide of how they've been focused in the past on doing more to help elevate humanity through business and trying to stand for something beyond just shareholder profit. And so back in May, Bill and Katie joined us for this awesome event. It was in May 15th through the 17th. As Bill was saying, we brought together thought leaders from across the business sector. And most notably, we had folks there, Jay Cohen Gilbert, who's the co-founder of B Labs. He's the one who created B Corporations. And Rand Stagen, who is the co-founder of Conscious Capitalism, and Preeta Bansal. Preeta was President Obama's chief legal counsel and was responsible at her time in office of developing benefit corporation legislation. Benefit corporation legislation has now been passed in 35 states, including Michigan. And it means it's possible now for a business to make a $49 filing and make a commitment to standing for something more than just putting money into the pockets of the shareholders of the organization, standing for something much more important than that. And all of these major players came and shared the stage to help the 300 or so attendees from around the country understand what it's going to take to get us to this next step. So what is the Do More Good business movement? It starts with our purpose of educating, empowering, and amplifying companies and business leaders who are doing more good. It is our intention to build the world's largest repository of information that makes it possible for business leaders to essentially access best practices of what other organizations, what other companies have done in order for them to elevate their impact. It's not about politics, it's not about religion. Any company that purports to be an impact or a purpose-driven business will tell you it's not about a marketing strategy. It's about something that's deep in the marrow of their bones. It's in their DNA. It's not pretending to be something that you're not. It's also not about aligning with conscious capitalism or becoming a certified B Corp or a 1% for the planet company. Any of those things. It's about all of those things and so much more. So our goal as a movement, which is partnering and sistering with what the Do More Good nonprofit movement is all about. Our goal is to create 100,000 Do More Good companies by the end of 2022. There are around 10,000 that are aligned behind these various movements today. That means they're a B Corp, a conscious capitalist, a 1% for the planet, or they have signed a pledge to become a benefit or a Do More Good corporation in their state. And we have a lot of work to do. We're embarking on it quickly. Our objective is to help companies understand how to find their way on the path to purpose. Every company is somewhere. They might be in the early rungs here. A company like Patagonia may already be towards the top, just about to realize their purpose. But what we do know is that every company, no matter how far evolved or how far along they are, it's always a work in progress. The minute any company stops and thinks, well, we've got it all figured out, is the minute they start to dry up and die on the vine. So it's always something we'll be working on. So I'm going to come back and talk about, again, the synergies that are happening between what's going on with the Do More Good nonprofit movement and the parallel movement around Do More Good for business. we're really, really excited to be partnering in ways that are bringing synergies to the world at play. And I'm going to share some ideas and thoughts with you related to how businesses and nonprofits should be and can be working together and why we should be working together. It's like we're two pieces of a puzzle that needs to be put together. And I've spent the majority of my life in the nonprofit sector. And as an entrepreneur, really out of necessity, I'm unemployable otherwise. I had to make a lot of decisions in my life to try to create business and nonprofit opportunities. And at every step, I've noticed and really paused and thought about how remarkably similar those two ventures can be, as long as purpose is at the core of either one of them. So I'm going to encourage you today. Everything you've heard this morning, I was inspired by Sarah's analogy of color and connection. I'm going to be talking a lot about connection in my presentation here this afternoon. It's such an important aspect of everything we do, but I'm going to encourage you to lean in, to really pay attention. You know, if you've given up a day of your time to be here, why wouldn't you maximize the outcome of your effort and your time and make a commitment to do something different by the time you leave here? Something that you're going to choose to do based on something you heard this morning or you'll hear this afternoon. Make a commitment to doing something different tomorrow or next week or next month that you weren't doing before coming here today. So make a commitment to your one thing. What's your one thing going to be? And I encourage you to start thinking about that now. It may be something you've already heard. I do want to encourage you to not worry about what other people's one things are. Worry about yourself today. Be a little selfish today and worry about yourself. I have a friend here who's going to help me make this point for me.
Worry about yourself. Worry about yourself.
Can I help?
No. I help. I don't. You can help when we're LTE, okay? You can help when we are LTE.
Okay.
Do you have this sissy?
Probably. You want me to help, Rose?
No. Thank you. No, thank you.
What do you want me to do?
Worry about yourself. Worry about yourself. I'll do this one, so gonna do that. You drive. Worry about yourself. Go
All
drive.
right. Thank you. All right. So I think we get the message. Worry about yourself. So this photo is a photo of my family when I was about 3.5 years old. That's my mother. I'm in the prison stripes in the middle. I'm not sure if that was a sign of things to come or not. But my mother, for lack of a better term, in my community in a small town in central Nebraska where I grew up, was a community organizer. I didn't know what that term was until President Obama ran and became elected. I'd never heard it before, but that's essentially what she did. She spent her entire life really working with and advocating for and lifting up and elevating nonprofits in our community. My grandmother started the local thrift shop that became the place where everybody would drop their things off and people would buy things and we would go down there and sort through things and volunteer. But my entire childhood was all about coming along with Mom as we were volunteering from one thing to the next, and it got seeded pretty deep into my world. Then when I went to high school, I got elected to serve on student council in my school, and as a kid of the generation where I'm from, of course, everyone got a trophy, and in my high school, everyone who ran for student council got elected. The thing, though, what they used to weed us out is they required us to go to leadership class. So I had the choice to go one workshop where I could go to a leadership class over 5 days at a college and learn leadership skills, which sounded horrible, or 4 hours every Saturday afternoon for 8 consecutive weeks with our vice principal, who reminded me a lot of that guy from Breakfast Club that beat Judd Nelson up, and I didn't want any part of that. I later learned that he's a really great dude, but at that time I was just terrified of him. So I chose the camp, and thank goodness that I did. I went off to this regional camp. There were about 500 kids from around the Midwest, and I got put in a group of 12 students. So me and the 11 others sat in a room. We called it a co-op. The entire week we worked together as a group competing against other co-ops. It was all hands-on, no lectures. I learned more about myself and about others in those 5 days than I had ever learned at any point in time along the way. This was the sign that hung in the wall. I expect to pass through this world but once. Any good, therefore, that I can do, or any kindness I can show, let me do it now. Let me not defer or neglect it, for I shall not pass this way again. I remember thinking, as I was driving home from that workshop in the 3.5-hour drive back home, that someday I'm going to start a business, and this is going to be the fundamental sentiment of what the business is about. And then lots of time goes by. Fast forward to 2013, I realized that we were kind of on a wayward path. We weren't really living up to the expectations that I had set for myself. And the words one day, do it now, just jumped off the page at me. And I started thinking, what can we do now? And that's when I came back to my leadership team and told them, we're doing something different. We're going to become a B Corporation. And as I sat there in that room, I'm sure many of you have seen similar scenarios play out. They were looking at me like with glassy eyes. It was like, oh shit, Jay's been to a conference, that look. Yeah, everything's going to change. And so I'm sure there are many of you that have seen that look. And we became the first B Corp in Nebraska. And I have a little video here that shares a little more about what B Corporations are as well.
We have a dream that one day all companies will compete not only to be the best in the world, but the best for the world. Others share this dream and have begun to turn the dream into a community. This community signed a declaration of interdependence and invited others to join them. Now, nearly 3,000 companies from around the world are turning our community into a global movement to redefine success in business. B Corporations use the power of business to solve social and environmental problems. An eyewear company that disrupts an industry and serves the poor. A shoe company that gives to children in need throughout 70 countries. An outdoor apparel company that stewards the environment. A brewing company that diverts 99.9% of its waste. An ice cream company that maintains its mission post-sale. A marketing company that empowers and elevates the community through its innovative Power of Three program. B Corp is a certification that helps consumers identify these change makers and investors make money and make a difference. As a community, we are passing laws across the country, creating a new kind of company that serves society and shareholders. We are leading a global movement of people using business as a force for good. Join us. Be the change.
Business should be thinking about what they can do to do more good in the world and to become an impact company. At Firespring, our purpose changed. Prior to that, we didn't have a stated purpose, but it would have been something like maximize shareholder value or something like that, which sounds so benign and horrible now. But our purpose now is to leverage our people, our products, and our profit to do more good. And we do that through our Power of Three program, where we give 1% of our top line revenue back to the nonprofits in our community, 2% of our products, in-kind products and services that we donate back, and then 3% of our people. We accomplish that by having every one of our 200 or so team members go out into the community and volunteer, paid time off for volunteer or for causes of their choice. Something aligns with their personal passion, their personal mission. We don't tell them what to volunteer for. And we hyper-focus on 3 nonprofits in particular. As part of our Power of Three, we've chosen 3 where the majority of our time and effort goes to. In 2018, when we add together the impact of our donations and our time, it adds up to $2.83 million for 200 people out of 2 offices in Omaha and Lincoln, Nebraska. We're really proud of that. And this is exactly what I believe that every nonprofit and every company should be looking at, this kind of model and how we can find alignment as a way to work together, the pieces of the puzzle coming together, so to speak. I believe that as we elevate the business community, where we have 100,000 companies across America who are focused on being a do more good company, imagine the impact that that's going to have on the relationships, the partnerships, and the synergy between those companies and the nonprofits who need their help and support, and the nonprofits who need that alignment. This is how it's going to feel.
Do you feel alive?
I feel happy of myself.
I feel happy of yourself too. What do you got, any words of wisdom? What about for all the other kids trying to learn how to ride their bike? Can you say anything to them? me some thumbs up.
Thumbs up, everybody!
All right.
Rock and roll!
Love that kid. He had to throw in the rock and roll there at the end. So in the last couple of years, the better part of my time and effort has been focused, number one, on helping nonprofits elevate their capacity to deliver the programs, the services that they provide, and to help companies understand that they need to follow a similar path where they feel so connected to their purpose. And what I've learned in a massive research project, we've had more than 2,000 business leaders and more than 5,000 nonprofit leaders that we've put through a series of interviews and surveys to try and understand where the heart of opportunity is. And this is what we've learned. We've learned that 3 areas, culture, community, and connection, are the places where we need to be focusing our time and effort. It's one of the reasons I was so glad to hear Sarah talking about connection just a moment ago, because it is so critically important. The culture part of it is about developing and evolving a culture, not just in businesses, but in our nonprofit organizations, that make people want to be part of something that's bigger than themselves. It's pretty simple. We can create that in our organizations with intention. We can't just let it happen by default. We have to be intentional about developing a culture. And the communities are broad and narrow. You know, we can be part of a broad community of nonprofit professionals. We can also be focused in a very, very small, narrow way in a neighborhood or a school district or whatever it is that where we feel we can do the most work and impact. But I'm going to focus in a little bit more on connection today. In fact, I decided that I'm going to use a good part of my time to do an activity with everyone in this room. And to set the activity up, I want to talk a little bit about the isolation problem. We have a massive problem on our hands in the United States and, in fact, across the world today. I find this stat really fascinating. So if you're a baby boomer, born after 1944, but before 1965, if you're a baby boomer, when you were in your 20s, you probably reported, because this is a national average stat, where you felt isolated or lonely around 24% of the time when you were in your mid-20s is kind of the key demographic that we're focused on here. Generation X, those born after 1965, a slight uptick, 25% isolation. But millennials, people that were born after 1981, but before the early 90s, report that they have felt extreme loneliness or isolation. 35% of them have had this. And this is the one that really, really, really shocks me. Generation Z, these are the new people that are born 1997 or later, you know, in their early 20s and younger. 45% of them have a sense of deep loneliness or isolation in the most connected world we've ever been in. We are the least connected that we've ever been. And I don't believe that it's only an issue of cell phones and technology. I do believe that that's part of it. Certainly, it's evident and it's easy to point fingers at that. But I also believe it's partly due to some parenting choices that we've made with this generation. It's not only on them, it's on the people who raised this generation that got us to the point where we are now. We know that loneliness isn't the physical absence of other people. It's the sense that that you're not sharing anything that matters with anyone else. And we all know that lonely is not the same as alone. You know, we can sit in a room like this one full of people and still feel lonely. So I want to do an activity today that is going to help us learn a few things about connection. And so here's the way this is going to work. In just a moment, I'm going to ask, and some of you are like already thinking, okay, great, we're going to do an activity. The introverts in the room are saying, I hope to God it's not something that makes me talk to people. Sorry, you're going to talk to people. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to get up in just a moment, and we're going to find somebody in the room that we haven't yet spoken with today. And we're going to have a very brief conversation with them. And I'm going to put 4 questions up on the screen that will make it easy for you. I want you to ask the other person that you're paired with one of the 4 questions, and then the other person can choose one and ask you a question back. If you finish that conversation, then put your hand up and walk and find another person and connect with that person and just do the same thing over again. It's really simple. How many of you found yourself offering up some insight or injecting into conversations as you're having conversations, as one person is answering the question. So what we notice about connecting and conversations today is, and I am one of the poster children for this, is we feel this incessant need to put ourselves into a story or a conversation in order to feel like we're connecting with someone. Oh, really? You were in Detroit? I have my cousin's aunt's uncle is a barber in Detroit. So we bring ourselves into conversations, and sometimes I refer to this as listening to win or listening to respond. You've heard that point. And I'm going to challenge you to do something in this next round a little bit differently, because I want us to really think about how to connect with intention. What I'm going to challenge you to do, instead of listening to win, I'm going to challenge you to listen to understand. And if we listen to understand instead of listening to win, if I can get that to go, there we go. Listening to understand instead of listening to win. It goes something like this. When someone is sharing their story, instead of interjecting or adding your own perspective, you're going to spend the entire time digging. Oh, really? Why was that? Tell me more. You want to know more. You want to get them to bring more out. And I want you to notice how different the conversations go as we go through this. So having conversations that are designed with intent to connect with people is a skill that we can all learn. It's something that we can all do better in our lives. I talk about this with my children all the time. It's about how to show interest in people is not by sharing with them how much you know. It's by finding out how much they know and digging as deep as you can into understanding the person so that the person feels seen. There's no more important quality in connecting in today's world than people who feel seen and feel heard. And the number one way we can help others with that is to be intentional about how we connect with them, to listen, to understand. So go ahead and find your way back to your seats, if you don't mind. So I would encourage everyone here, as you're finding your way back to your seats, to earmark some of those conversations, to come back later and finish having a conversation. I do want to share that this intentional connection stuff is something that we will get the handle on. I have one more friend here to share how it's going to feel when we get this figured out.
Come right to me. Push hard. You got it. Keep pushing. Keep pushing. Keep pushing. Woohoo!
This is you at 5 o'clock. I love that. Okay. So a few things before I wrap up today. I do want to encourage and invite you all to connect. I'm a huge fan and believer while we're on the topic of connections in LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a platform that makes it possible for professionals in the nonprofit and business world to stay connected with one another. I think it's like the giant Rolodex in the clouds, and there will come a day, 5 years, 3 years from now, when it's going to have completely replaced all of the other ways that we stay connected in a professional relationship. I would encourage you, if you're one of those people that ignore every LinkedIn request you get, to consider setting it up. It's not like Facebook or Instagram or anything else where you have to go and have a presence all the time, but it's just a way to stay connected with people that you've come across where you don't have to update and modify emails and phone numbers. It all is right there for you. So consider that. And I would encourage you to consider connecting with me on LinkedIn. That's one of the things that it's for. One of the things that I want to share with you, the Fundraising Effectiveness Project, which is the survey, the study that Sarah was referencing earlier from the fundraising consultant. I just did a 1-hour webinar on that last week, and it's recorded. It's available online. So if you want to learn about donor retention strategies on how to curtail this problem we have about losing the donors. They're coming on the front of the treadmill, and half of them are going right back off the other side. There are things that we can do to drastically change that And they're really remarkably simple things. I'd love to share with you a link to those sessions and many of the other educational sessions. At Firespring, our mantra is to educate without expectation. So we have dozens and dozens of free educational webinars every month that is shared out with the world and the community, so that we'd love to share those with you. So connect with me there, and we can share some information with you. So I want to finish with a true tale of girls, gifts, and guilt, and it's not nearly as provocative as the title sounds. It's a tale that starts back when I was, a young father, 2001, and I was getting prepared to go on an epic adventure to New Zealand with a really good college buddy of mine. And it was the first time I was ever going to have the chance to do some things that I'd always wanted to do. I was going to jump out of airplanes and go scuba diving with sharks and ride motorcycles on mountain ridges and ride in those crazy boats that do 360s in those little narrow rivers, all the stuff that I'd read and heard about. And I was feeling a little bit guilty about this, not just for that, but I was also feeling guilty because my daughters at the time were young. They were 6 and 9. And one of my daughters had what I could best describe as severe separation anxiety. I would leave the house and hand her to the babysitter. I would literally have to peel her off of my leg, kicking and screaming as she's yelling, "Don't leave me, don't leave me." And I would be saying something like, "Sweetheart, the movie's only 2 hours long. I promise we'll be home." You know, it was really frustrating to be gone. And knowing that I was going to be gone for 2 weeks, I was pretty nervous about this whole thing. So I wanted to do something special for them. I thought there's got to be something that I could do just so that while I'm gone, I can stay connected with them. And also just in case, I never come home, because, there was always that chance with some of the things that I was doing. And so my idea at the time was to do something around reading and story time, because my thing at the time with my girls was story time. Everything revolved around reading books. There were thousands of them over the years, but our favorite story time thing was telling the next chapter in the never-ending story of Jennifer, this character that we made up. Jennifer was this little girl who oversaw a magical chain of islands. In the center island, there was a volcano that oozed hot chocolate lava, and these big logs made out of marshmallow were floating in the rivers. The trees were made out of candy bars. The bushes were cotton candy. The beaches were Skittles. I mean, this was a pretty cool place. Lots of special visitors, grandma, cousins, aunts, uncles. Lizzie McGuire made a visit or two back in the day. And the majority of the visitors that came to visit were other young ladies about the same age as my girls, with similarly with eerily similar names to what their friends' names were. I don't know how that whole thing happened, but it was amazing what happened on this island. When these people would come to Jennifer's lost island, they were lost and they were lonely and they were afraid, and Jennifer found a way to lift them up. She was vulnerable, she was open and honest, and she pulled them in, and she made every one of them feel seen and heard. They would run through a brick wall to get back into their life and start taking action on some things that maybe they weren't doing. It was amazing the power that she had to change lives. And so I sat down in a little recording studio that I made in the closet of my bedroom and started making some books on tape as a way for me to be able to do something to leave behind. And of course, they didn't know I was doing this. And I was a broadcasting major in college, so I had sound effect records. I even used the old glockenspiel to do the ding, turn to the next page, all kinds of character voices. And it was so much fun doing these. And I remember, as I'm getting ready to finish up the project, I had the 8 cassette tapes. There were 2 stories per side, so 16 stories stacked on a table. And I was so proud. And I remember thinking that this is going to be a gift that my daughters will remember forever. A couple of days go by. We're at the airport now, getting ready to fly out. And my daughters decided to give me a gift. My middle daughter, Ellen, stepped forward and handed me this little doll handmade out of yarn. I didn't really know that's what it was at the time. It just looked like a wad of yarn. And like to like most of us have received these kind of gifts, and I said something, saccharin, sweet, like, oh, thank you, this is really awesome, I appreciate it, and I shoved it into my pocket, kind of with the same reverence that I would hang things on the refrigerator for a week before throwing them away or whatever else. It was one of those kind of things. But then she kept talking, and she said, Daddy, we knew that this was going to be an epic adventure for you. And I was thinking, yes, they get it. I'm going on an epic adventure, still all about me at the time. And so she says, Daddy, we decided that you needed to take Jennifer with you. And I'm expecting her to lunge for my leg and grab on because her bottom lip is quivering and she looks kind of timid and nervous. And instead, she just says, if Jennifer's with you, you're going to know what to do. You're going to know where to go. You'll never get lost. And if you feel lonely, just give Jennifer a hug. And we're going to be okay too because we know Jennifer's with you. And I knew in that moment that my daughters had actually given me a gift that I will remember forever. I'm not going to pretend like having daughters is all rainbows and fairies. We all know that that's not the case. There are so many things, so many times when they make it really hard. In fact, just life in general is hard. There's so much that gets thrown at us over time. We lose a pet, we lose a job. In 2002, a year after this trip, I lost my job. I was actually fired as the CEO of my own company, the same company that I run today that Bill was talking about. And that's a different story of how I was able to recapture it, regather it from the venture capitalists that are now no longer in my life, thank goodness. But it was a really, really difficult time. It was the most embarrassing chapter in my life. They brought me in and told me on a 4-3 vote, which I had weighed my board really heavily with my investors, because after 2011 happened, the economy went down, and they wanted me to lay off half the team, and I couldn't do it. I could not bring myself to do it, and I ended up getting fired as the CEO of my own company. 2006, I had to sit down with my daughters and my son and have the hardest conversation I've ever had in my life when I shared with them that I was no longer going to be married to their mother. If anybody's ever been through a divorce, you know what the pain is like. In 2011, my mom had been fighting breast cancer for 2 years. And I went home, my dad, the cousins, my brothers, and all of their kids are all gathered around. There's a little makeshift bed in the middle of the living room, the little hospital bed that cranks up and down, and she was lying there trying her best, just hanging on. My mom, like most of our mothers, was the center of our family. She just brought so much joy into everyone's life, and she was always worried about everyone else, making sure everyone else is taken care of and everybody else has what they need. That was her role. And I somehow got the strength to climb up there in that little bed, and I put my hand behind her head, and I cradled her and stroked her cheek with my right hand, and I said, Mom, you're the best mom anyone in the world could ask for. We're okay. It's okay. We're going to be okay. It's time for you to let go. Because she had been struggling like she had her whole life to hang on because she thought she needed to be there for us. And she took her last breath looking into the eyes of someone who loves her more than life itself. Jennifer was in my pocket that day, as she has been through all of life's really important events as a reminder of what's important to me. And I'm going to introduce you guys to Jennifer. This is Jennifer. Jennifer has been a little tattered and torn. She's been with me in more than 50 countries all around the world. She's been in my pocket for every funeral and wedding and graduation ceremony and every important life event. And if I get on a stage and have to talk to people like this today, she is my reminder of what's important and what needs to ground me. I hadn't shared Jennifer with the world until about a year ago, and I had to get my daughter's permission to do it. And they have happily given their permission. But my daughters, operating from a place of love instead of a place of guilt, taught me that if we lead from our hearts instead of with our heads, we can do some pretty amazing things in this world. And if we really focus on how to be vulnerable, number one, and I invite everyone here to consider continuing down this path of vulnerability. It's something that I've been on for my entire adult life, and I get better at it every year. But I do believe that being vulnerable doesn't diminish our credibility, it enhances it. And I believe that leading from a place of love doesn't compromise our power, it elevates it. And if we lead from a place of vulnerability and love, we can do some really amazing things. And I'm going to encourage you again, before I finish up here today, to keep focusing by the end of the day today on your one thing. What one thing are you going to do differently tomorrow, next week, or next month that you didn't do before coming here today? What's your one thing going to be? And I encourage you to start working on it now, because a year from now, you're going to wish you had. All right? So I learned a long time ago that the ego seeks the destination and the soul seeks the journey. What I'm going to encourage you to do is write the next chapter from the perspective and the point of view of your soul and not your ego. And what's that going to look like? Get out there in the world and do more good. It's never too late to be what you might have been. Thank you so much for your time.